Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Chasing the Gold. I'm Shadan Larkey. As I've mentioned a couple times, we are doing something really different and exciting with Chasing the Gold this year, which is that we have taken all of our Oscar categories and divided them up among a team of writers. And my goal as we progress through the season is to bring all of my writers on and have them talk about their categories, geek out with me about their categories. So special guest, tell our viewers and listeners about yourself and about your category that we're going to be diving in today.
Hi, I'm Jaylan Salah. First of all, thank you, Shadan. I'm so happy to be here. I'm covering actually two categories, Best Hair and Makeup and Best Lead Actor. But now we're talking about Best Hair and Makeup, which is my favorite category ever because I love the prosthetics. I love people covered in blood, in grossness. I just love seeing actors with pale faces, with scars. I love everything that just transforms a person. So I'm just so happy and excited every year when I'm watching the movies and thinking, oh, this will be nominated for the Best Hair and Makeup, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's actually my favorite category ever, along with costume design.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that for a second. How did you become a movie junkie, an awards junkie? And then was there like a particular movie that made you go, oh, the hair and makeup is really interesting here? Like how did the love of movies transition into a love of hair and makeup?
Okay, so I loved movies since I was a kid. Like I was a cinephile, born a cinephile because my dad always brought VHS tapes into the house. My mom and dad were big movie buffs. It started very early at age. I remember the first awards that I was really excited about was, of course, the Oscars, where it was Titanic, and it was, is Leo DiCaprio going to be nominated or not? And I was just so crazy about it. And I think they were going live, showing it on our local channel live. But it was very, very late at night, and I waited and waited and waited, but I was just so young, so I overslept. And when you miss something in the past, in the 90s, girl, you can't find it, you can't get it. So it was a goner for me, and I was crying the next day. So this was my first attempt at loving awards or just getting excited about it. And then years and years later, my dad was like obsessed with the theory of everything. I think he wanted Eddie Redmayne to win. I wanted Benedict Cumberbatch to win for Imitation Game. So we were heated together and we were following the awards.
Nice. Yeah. Did you have I'm trying to think of like a movie where the hair and makeup particularly stood out to me sort of at an early age. I guess I remember costumes because speaking of Titanic, I remember like, you know, the red dress that Rose wears when she's like going up to, I guess, jump off the ship, and she's wearing this like beaded red gown. I remember at a very young age just thinking that was like the most beautiful dress I'd ever seen, and I felt like she looked like an angel, and I was like, I want to wear something like that. And I'm still, by the way, looking for my Titanic dress. But I'm trying to think of like hair and makeup. Like, was there a movie where you remember looking at the hair and makeup and thinking that it was particularly
definitely Death Becomes Her? I think Death Becomes Her. I was obsessed because I loved her eyes. And I watched it also at a very young age. Goldie Hawn has this scary eyes. And I was like obsessed with her look when they kind of like shot her and she had a hole in her stomach. I love this movie so much as a kid. And I think hair and makeup, I was always obsessed. Like, how did they get their skin to melt? This was in my childhood head all the time. And I was always thinking about movies. I think as a child, I was a weird child. So yeah. So this was part of my obsession with, I think, hair and makeup. And it started with Death Becomes Her, and then all horror movies, because I'm a big horror buff. So whenever I see someone with a deformed face and hair that just sticks out in all the wrong places, I'm like, wow, how does the process work?
Mm-hmm. And we should mention, so for your latest Chasing the Gold column, that's actually what you dived into. You're called it the Multiverse of Freaks, and you talked all about sort of the monsters that we have this season.
Yes, of course. And I was just like, I think Chasing Them. I want to watch Sasquatch Sunset, and I just got glimpse of it, and also Dune because everyone was talking about like Austin Butler's bald cap and the Baron and all that stuff. Also, yeah. So also Kingdom of Planet of the Apes. Is it Kingdom? I hope it's Kingdom. I'm not bringing it. So this one I'm so excited to watch because I want to dig into, of course, the makeup because I know it will, of course, be nominated for that. At least this is what I just anticipate. So yeah, I love freaks and I love when freaks are on screen, and I love to see if they're nominated for their freakiness and how the hair and makeup team talk about it. Also, they were even talking about challengers. There was this intense article kind of like talking about sweat beads and how sweat plays a game into it. So yeah, you think all the simple stuff and then it translates into the magic you see on screen, and I'm always excited into the behind the cameras.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite in getting to interview hair and makeup people in particular. They tell you the coolest details that you don't even think about. Like I remember I was interviewing somebody and she was talking about how in period pieces, like a lot of times for men, if they have piercings, they have to cover them up because that takes you out of the movie. If you see a man 500 years ago. And like I had never considered, that was never something that you think about. But there is somebody whose job it is to cover up piercing holes or like dirt under the fingernail, just like little things like that. Which brings me into tell everyone the ultimate freak that you have chosen for us to talk about today, because you picked an excellent movie for this.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by the one and only Francis Ford Coppola. What a movie! I mean, what a movie, Shadan.
Yes. Okay, so we need to talk about this because I've so many before we even dive into the movie. I want to know about your journey, which is when did you watch this movie? How old were you? I think I need to know. And then how many times have you seen it? Like we need to talk about how you came to this movie in particular.
First of all, I watched it when I was a kid, of course, and I got so scared because I think I was a very scared kid, and then I watched, of course, glimpses. And my mom is a big horror movie buff. She was like, she couldn't wait for me and my sister to grow up to watch horror movies to share with her. So I watched it as a kid, and then I can't watch horror movies anymore. No, please, this, and then Interview with Vampires, and then fast forward to me watching The Evil Dead with a bunch of friends at a sleepover party at my house. Killed my horror movie scare, and I watched one after the other, all the grungy, gritty stuff. So I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula then again, I think as a young adult or something, and fell in love. I didn't see it as a horror movie. I saw it as a romantic, gothic tale, just filled with, like blood and prosthetics and people turning into wolves and bats. So yeah, this is cool too. Why not? And I think I fell in love with all the details. It felt to me like this. It had even the Arabian Nights, like 1001 Arabian Night Dream. It felt very oriental too, which was weird for an American movie like that. So, and I think because of the Eastern choices in the music, even some of the costumes itself. So I loved it even beyond. And I watch it, tell you what, whenever I feel like I need a romantic movie fix, because I don't really get off regular romantic movies, Notebook, Notting Hill. Sorry, guys, not for me. Rare stuff. When I want a romantic movie, I watch this. I watch Edward Scissorhands. I watch, The Crow. These are my romantic games.
That is amazing. I mean, I told you I hadn't actually seen this movie before you told me you wanted to talk about it for this episode, and I didn't. So the only context that I knew about this movie, and I didn't even know it was Francis Ford Coppola, but the only thing I knew about it was that it was sort of the introduction of Gary Oldman. It was sort of the movie that launched his career to wider audiences. But I mean, I had no idea. Like we had baby Keanu, we had sort of like gorgeous Winona Ryder. I mean, Richard E. Grant shows up. We have Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing. I mean, the cast is incredible. I really, really loved this movie a lot.
It's amazing. I'm so happy that I introduced you to it, Shadan, because whenever I introduce something and I'm so excited about it, and my friends are like, okay, Jaylan, yeah, sure, it was good. So when you feel like you share the excitement, this is what gets me off, because I think this movie is just visually gorgeous. And it's also very layered and very dreamy, but also kind of creepy too, which makes for a great love story, in my opinion.
Have you read the book? How do you feel about it as an adaptation of Dracula? As like a
I think
literary adaptation?
For me, I think the adaptations of Dracula kind of vary because then you have the faithful adaptations and then the wacko crazy adaptations and then the ones where Dracula is kind of a monster adaptations.
Mm.
For me, what makes this movie even higher level that I felt it was always about Dracula, like blood sucking, count, like scary, good. Even the book even gave me the idea that he was kind of a this ominous creepy figure, but then you come to this movie and he is a man in love. Yes, he is very dark and mysterious, like your average psychopath, like the guy who's obsessed with you and like, okay, but you're just so good. Oh, I can't forget the memory. So he has this toxic personality that kind of transcends the medium of the horror and the Dracula himself, but at the same time, yes, in terms of putting me in the mood of the book, I think it kind of elevated even the feeling more. Because for me, always the book was kind of like this scary thing associated with the Hammer movies and all the classic adaptations even more. It because it I think it adds layers to it. I tell you, the book is, first of all, I think those books that we even read as kids, now you can't even go through them because you will keep finding faults. And I think they're written in a very classic way, which is just not time specific. And I don't think they fit our times. The film kind of took us away from the traditional, boring, ominous, one-dimensional idea of Dracula. Yes, he's this monster kind of like sucking blood from people, but at the same time, he is this lover, just searching for his love through time and space. And I think this idea is just romantic, even if he's a very toxic person. But at the same time, who cares? It's a movie. So yeah, I know what you mean. I think it surpasses the book. I always hate it when people are like, always the book is better than the movie. No, 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 no. Some movies are way better than the books.
No, you're right. This is a prime example of that. So, in terms of the Oscars, though, this movie has a really interesting. So we have three Oscar wins. We have costumes, hair and makeup, and visual effects. Which that's something that I found really interesting watching the movie, was sort of thinking about how all three of those things work together, and even places particularly where like the visual effects might end and the makeup takes over, or vice versa.
I think for me, I think they kind of like work together. What I read is that Francis Ford Coppola said he wanted the actors to be the shining part. He didn't want the setting. He didn't want the set design. I don't think he wanted to pay a lot on the visual effects and stuff like that. He wanted to make it more like homemade, like in-house. And he used like practical effects rather than having like all the cool CGI stuff, even when it wasn't that advanced back then. But still, you could feel it was all man-made. Yeah, like you could see the craft. It's not that hidden from you. You could see everything. You could nitpick on it, but it went with the mood because I felt like the costume design and the makeup were hands in hands. Sometimes you could feel like, wow, the makeup is just gorgeous, but look at the costumes. Or you could see the costumes and feel like something is off. What is going on? But here, you feel that everything works in harmony. Even those, like visual effects that feel kind of old schoolish, you feel it kind of like adding to the resonance of the story, how implemented it and rooted in its gothic old age horror. So I kind of liked it, and I feel like it deserved all those wins because it's a very visual work of art, and you could always just watch it and taste everything. Like imagine when they're talking about like the beautiful makeup designer, how Francis Ford Coppola didn't want pale faces; he wanted translucent skin, so that you could show the veins and the arteries. I mean, this is an artist at work. Come on, argue with me that horror is not the favorite medium for awards, but this is a work of art, even if it's horror. When you know that you don't want people to get turned off by seeing, like a very pale face, and you could feel, I see the makeup. Oh, how stupid. No, you just see the translucency of the skin as if, sucking the vampirism itself, sucking the blood, just sucks the life out of people. So you see what is underneath the layer of the skin. So well deserved. They totally go hand in hand. You could tell all the elements working in harmony.
No, it's really interesting. Because I found the same thing. A lot of times when I watch films that are a bit older, I do struggle with it feeling outdated. I mean, there are elements where maybe it does feel a bit outdated, but I found that it does add to sort of the gothic or just the mood of it. It's almost like it feels outdated on purpose, and
Totally.
in that way it feels ageless. I don't I yeah, I it really blew my mind. and there were so many specific moments. Do you have like maybe a standout character that you wanted to start with, just as we dive into all of the many freaks of this Francis Ford Coppola adaptation?
I mean, I loved Lucy so much because I
Mm.
thought she was very horny. And think about it, how the costumes and the makeup made her the horny character that she was. She was a woman going through sexual awakening at a time where it was kind of very, you could tell the conservatism of it all, like everybody was just held back. And she was very passionate and very sensual. So that translated to everything. Her look, her hair, her makeup, her costumes. And put her in contrast to Mina, especially because Mina goes through lots of transitions. There's the Mina who is very modest and just Jonathan Harker's fiance, and then you have the Mina who also had her sexual awakening at the hands of Prince Vlad, and then you have Mina going through the transformation herself. Lucy was always just this voluptuous creature, so that when she transformed, yes, you felt that it brought out all the, I think it was her unhinged, like her on steroids, like the transformation scene when she was just vampire Lucy, you could feel, oh, how scared, you know what I mean? Like she's there, she's out there, and she's uncontrollable, she's unstoppable, and she's gonna eat us all. So I loved her because, first of all, I always thought when I was reading the book, like, well, why can't we have more of Lucy? She seems like a very cool girl as opposed to, like boring Mina. Here, he didn't make Mina boring because she was going through this passionate struggle inside of her. Like, do I love my dark prince, my strange friend, or do I love my boring, also cute husband and fiance Jonathan Harker? So yeah, for me, I was mesmerized by, of course, Lucy, and then of course we have like the Prince of Darkness himself, Prince Vlad, whom I can't
Yeah,
push enough.
we'll get there, but I'm so glad you mentioned Lucy because I found her to be the most interesting. I know Winona is our star, but there's something about Lucy, particularly as you mentioned, when she sort of is becoming more sickly, and the way that they add the shadows to her face and like the bruising with like the purple. I just thought that was so. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but it was just so like beautiful and brilliant and twisted, and like the details. Like I wish so badly that I could pick their brain about like how did you pick those particular colors to represent sort of the decay. You know what I mean?
Definitely, it felt like it was death. She was becoming death, like death suited her in a way. Her paleness, and at the same time, that blueness kind of like creeping up on her, like she was decaying alive. And it was so good. It was so fascinating to watch. So I totally get what you mean. I totally agree. She's just amazing. And she looks amazing even as a corpse. So yeah, she was just, I heard Diane Kruger saying this in the press conference for the Shrouds. She was like talking like, I look good dead. So I think Lucy looks really good dead.
Oh, I agree. The moment where we see her in her coffin, I was like, oh, like she's, as the kids say, like serving looks like in her coffin. I was like, I look that good in my coffin one day. Good Lord. No, and and to the Brides of Dracula, I thought that was such an interesting. I loved sort of which I did not. I mean, I did not recognize Monica Bellucci, which that tells you everything you need to know there. But the almost like a smoky eye before it became cool to have a smoky eye. But and I messaged you this, but this is one of the horniest movies I've ever seen. But the fact that it leans into the sensuality so much with the makeup and the costumes too.
It felt like a harem. Like this is, I think for me, it was the first time I saw the Brides of Dracula as if it was a harem, like as if he was invited. But instead of like the guy doing it, it was them feeding on him, and it was so beautiful because it felt for me like a very Arabian tale reversed. Like they are killing, because you have in the Arabian 1001 Arabian Nights, you have like Shahryar and you have Scheherazade, and she's telling him stories and she's afraid that he will cut her head and blah, blah, blah. No, here he is going there and they are the ones who consume him for their pleasure, for the storytelling purposes. So he has become the sacrifice, the lamb. And for me, this was just awesome. Also, the way the hair was made. One of them had like Medusa hair. It had like all these snakes. And one of them, and I think they were all kind of dressed to look a bit Arabian in a way. So for me, it was like this seductive veil of, like this Orientalist weird atmosphere. And he was just thrust into it, poor Jonathan Harker, and you could feel it. And also the fact that they didn't talk, the way their eyes and the makeup and the fangs and all those extra teeth did the talking, They only talked in Romanian and kind of hissed most of the time. This made it even creepier. They were, of course, very sexualized, but in a way that didn't seem, like it was objectifying. It felt very actually inviting to the environment itself. So yeah, I totally get it. When you see I think this movie is all about sexual awakening of individuals, because you see Jonathan Harker, the way his hair, I was just joking with my sister, the way his hair was made in the first of the movie, you could feel like virgin. Come on. So he was going there to them and he found his sexuality on their hands, not his fiance. Then you have Mina and how her hair transformed even before Dracula and then after Dracula. And then you have Lucy with her crazy wild hair all the time. And then you have Dracula himself and the stages that he goes through. So I think this movie is horny because it's about the awakening of the individuals through, of course, like this consumption feeling. And when you have your makeup and when you have the blood and the amount of blood being thrown at people, and when you have the fangs and the claws, and it's all adding to the tension, not taking you away from it, I think this is when you feel like this is a brilliant movie, very well made in all aspects.
And well, let's talk about Dracula. Let's address him, our beautiful elephant in the room. What I found, first of all, the thing that stood out to me was like his forehead, whatever they did to Gary Oldman's forehead to kind of, and all of this to say, my main point that I'm not articulating because I'm getting so excited is that there's a lot of talk about sort of prosthetics being the performance and prosthetics taking over and all this. And I mean, we saw this with Gary Oldman's eventual Oscar win for The Darkest Hour. Like, what I really liked about the way that Dracula is done is you could still see this man emote, and there's a performance underneath the prosthetics and the makeup and it's when you see him sort of in his more regular look, you realize that you can still see those elements of that man when he becomes Dracula. And I thought it was just a really brilliant example of what prosthetics can do for a performance and sort of how those two things can work together. And to your earlier point, I think this is just such a great example of like the perfect marriage of a film, of what it looks like when all the crafts come together really well.
Definitely. I totally agree with you, Shadan. And I think too that when you have someone like Francis Ford Coppola, and this is a brilliant filmmaker, especially back there in the day, you could tell how the involvement and how the freedom and liberty he gives to the heads of other departments, they all work together to create, like the work of art that we see. Because we have like Michelle Burke, the one responsible for the makeup design, and then you have the costumes, and then you have all the hair team. And you could tell with looking at Dracula how you, yes, could create the monster, but the monster actually speaks, which is why I'm excited this season to see more freaks, to see how their faces speak, even with the prosthetics, how their emotions are transmitted. Because here, the scene where he's crying and it's that prosthetic and the tears are going down his face, or the transformation scenes. I could see, of course, why he hated the bat costume, which I felt was the worst. I liked the wolf in a way. I liked him when he had like the old man costume and the old man prosthetics and stuff and the weird hair. But then you have especially this first scenes, the introductory scenes with him bringing in Jonathan, and you could feel him, how he shifts moods from actually predatory and welcoming, and then he cries when he remembers Elizabeth, his wife, his dead wife, and then the hunger because he hasn't seen this alive person for a long time, and he's hungry for his youth, for his flesh, for his blood. So all of this couldn't have worked, I think, without a great character actor, a freak like Gary Oldman, someone who we could just throw in and he'll give you an exceptional, scary, weird, kind of like unhinged performance. And we miss, I think, these kinds of actors these days, because I think beyond looking cool and just being a hotshot on the screen, we need someone who is just not afraid to go to dark places and just showing his dark side and fangs and like edginess. So yeah.
And you know what stood out to me, especially in sort of the beginning when we see him in the full Count Dracula, is the level of detail. I mean, even you mentioned it does in some moments look like his face is almost melting off. I mean, the crevices and the wrinkles and almost like the moldy gray purpley, it's like disgustingly beautiful. I don't know how else to describe it. But no, I completely agree with you.
Definitely, definitely. I just love the way that you take Dracula and you put him through a lot of phases, even a
Mhm.
lot of, they have the context, like he even says sometimes the eye color flips from when it's red, from when it's orange, from when it's weird burning, and then it's like his original blue eye color. And you could feel how this doesn't even seem like, you don't see it. You know what I mean? Like you don't feel
Mm.
it's being forced on you. Like sometimes he's in love, but then he's passionate. He's trying, I think the first scene where he's trying to seduce Mina, you could see his eyes turning red, and then he sees her, and then he reverts back to being the regular guy, the guy who is in
Mhm.
love. And since this just happens organically, you realize that this is something that helps you being engulfed in the overall mood of the film and
Mhm.
loving what is going on in front of your eyes and just getting attracted to it, and kind of like it helps you too to analyze it and see all the elements that work, what are they. So
Mhm.
it just made me realize films like this make you realize why you love cinema, why you love being a cinephile, because everything just works together perfectly and you're engulfed in this atmosphere for hours or so. And then when you
Mhm.
wake up, you realize, man, real life, ugh.
You know what's funny is particularly with this, because we do see all of our different characters in various stages, so it almost highlights like how good it is, because when you see him in his regular non-Dracula self, but then you see these elements of him again, the forehead, the hairline, the bone structure that come into play later, and how it's almost like it's like planting seeds or planting hints of like what's to come in the future.
Definitely, definitely. And I love too that when you see him as the Prince Vlad talking to Mina, it's different from him. He is this fierce warrior, kind of like impaling the enemies and just being in his full power. Like, even when Mina, you can see he's softened, but then when he used to rule and be the king of this castle or whatever, and just falling in love with his wife and then returning to his wife and being a great warrior, bloodthirsty and just vicious, it's even different even when he has not a lot of prosthetics on and not a lot of makeup on. So you could feel the feeling itself, the emotion underneath the skin, underneath whatever is being applied to his face, because the attention to detail is just magnificent. And the way I think he's reincarnated in front of Mina as this
Mm.
strange friend, as this mysterious figure with the hair and the mustache, and like, and the eyes that always seem to pierce, like he's always watching from through the glasses. And I don't know, it's both creepy and at the same time just magical. So it kind of like
Mhm.
transforms you to this time and place that is so different from you. And I think this is also, it kind of transforms himself. Like Gary Oldman is transformed even as normal as he tries to look in this film.
No, I completely agree with you. I think this is like one of the only films I've seen of young Gary Oldman, which was really interesting because I feel like most of the time when I think of Gary Oldman, I think of how he looks now. But I found him to be so completely charming, and then I was felt uncomfortable by how charmed I was by this man. But no, I mean it was just fascinating. I mean the hair, the and even with Keanu Reeves too, like as you mentioned, that he sort of is starts off as this like buttoned up person who becomes, more disheveled and stuff. And I think a lot of times when we do think of hair and makeup, we think of, it's easier to spot on the women, right? Because we can look at the lipstick and the eye makeup, but I think the men here are particularly impressive, which brings me to the next character that I really want to talk about, which is Renfield, because it is such a fascinating descent into madness. Like the first time we see him, and you think, oh man, this guy's completely gone. And then you see him again, and it's like he's progressed into something even worse, and you just don't think that that's even possible.
And I think all the grossness too, like he's all like he. This is how you feel like the hair and makeup and the costumes are working perfectly. You always feel like he stinks. Like every time I
Mhm.
saw him on screen, I felt like I don't want to be near you,
Yes,
dude. Come
yes,
on, he
yes.
must be rotting. You could feel like he's being
Mm,
trapped here, just a man going mad with his thoughts, with his obsession with his master, and at the same time, he's just losing it. And you
mm,
can feel as if he's reeking, like as if the stench is eating him alive, as if all of this confinement is just taking its toll on him. So imagine this is being transformed to you throughout the few scenes he appears in, and it's all done through the way his hair and his clothes and his performance is heightened by how he seems, like his face is stained. It feels like this guy hasn't showered in ages. It feels like this guy is just mad, so he doesn't even know how to handle his, like his personal hygiene or his sense of self or his body. So I think it's a great performance, and I think it's heightened and also elevated too by the hair and makeup.
Yeah, and you're right that he's, now that I think about it, he's not in very much of the movie, but it left such a strong impression on me, because it's just such a brilliant portrayal of that descent into madness. And yeah, I totally, now that I think about it, did sort of feel that stench that the word that I keep going back to is like decay. Like you can just sort of
Yes,
see what the passage of time has done to each of these characters through the way that their hair and makeup sort of falls apart.
definitely.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned decay because this movie feels like it's dying. You could even feel
Mm.
it whenever they approach, like a bunch of flowers, or when Lucy's kind of like descending into the cemetery and you could see the candles and the children being killed. This movie is about death, but it's a very, very beautiful movie about death. Like it's about, I
Mm.
think also it's about death of the heart, death of the soul, death of whatever you meet in life, like death of the spirit, death of the love. So death of the innocence for Jonathan Harker and for Mina. So yeah, it's about decay and it's about death and it's about the rotting spirit. Sometimes how the grasp of evil is just so hard on others. So I kind of agree. Decay is a beautiful word.
Mm. Let's talk about Winona Ryder. I mean, you mentioned this a little bit, but for some reason, again, I guess I have not seen. I mean, I've seen Edward Scissorhands, I guess, but I haven't seen very many of her more 90s. I've seen Little Women as well, but there's something so like ethereal about how she looks in this movie, and she just looks like an angel, but an angel that's becoming progressively sort of darker and more menacing almost. I loved, and even the hair and makeup, so the change is so subtle, but it is impactful because it's like she, I don't know, matures, or just there's like this depth to her at the end that wasn't there at the beginning.
I totally agree. For me, I think whenever I see Winona Ryder with red lipstick back in the time, I would feel no, this girl, she has a face that is like a stream of clear water. Just let her give it. Just let her show it. She doesn't need anything. She's this petite, beautiful girl, and she looks like she can just break. Like you can just hold her and she'd break in your hands because she's so soft and she is so fragile. I think, and fragility gives her a heightened sense of sensuality in this movie because when you see her, she's always this fragile, kind of like docile, calm friend to Lucy, and then you see her with Dracula when he enters her life and how that transforms her and changes her in a way that also, as you said, doesn't seem a lot. Like they didn't. Sometimes when you feel like you have the girl in the beginning and then you have the woman, no, she's going
Mm.
through the transformations and she is becoming a woman, but it doesn't have to be a lot. You could feel it in her performance, you could feel it in the way she's interacting with Dracula, kind of like discovering herself. So her makeup work was excellent because it was just few touches here and there. Yes, after she was bitten, you could feel the translucent skin effect again. And then you have her when she's with Dracula and you see the blood on her face and she's growing into the woman she was destined to be. So you just love Mina and you root for her, and you just want her to escape whatever she is going through, but at the same time, she's going through love, she's going through discovery of herself as a woman, which I really loved about this movie here. She was just discovering herself at the hands of this man she saw and met in a weird, just change of time, I guess.
And particularly with her characters, I think is where we see the costumes and the makeup really working together, because the makeup goes, just her costumes become like darker and more like gothicy and extreme, or harsher in some ways, or more ornate as she matures. It's really, really beautiful.
Very, very much. And she kind of like fits like you. I knew when she was supposed to be in The Godfather 3, you could tell that Francis Ford Coppola wanted to work with her. Like he wanted to get
Mm.
something out of her, a performance, a discovery, whatever. And I feel like he found it here, and I think it's just so good to watch, so fascinating,
Mhm.
because Winona is just this girl, like she was like this ultimate dream of the 90s. She was in many movies and she was always there being, like different from what you would imagine an actress, her stage, her just presence. So I don't know, I just loved her here and I thought she was the perfect choice for Mina. Perfect, perfect,
Oh,
perfect.
I agree. You know what's interesting? I thought a lot about that in watching the film. Is like it would be hard for me to imagine anyone else, even Keanu, which I love him as a cultural figure, and I think he's wonderful, and he's a prince and a puppy dog and all these things, sunshine in a man. But
Yes.
his range as an actor is not perhaps the broadest, but like there's something, his innocence, or just the you root for him. And I struggled so much because I was like, I guess I want her to be with Dracula, but I want her to be with Jonathan because their love story is so sweet and this and that. But
They're so
I just,
cute.
yeah, but I can't imagine anyone else. It's like this movie is just perfectly cast.
Because when you see him with Dracula in the beginning, and it's like him and Dracula, and you see the contrast between them, he has this
Exactly.
very clear and innocent and beautiful face, almost like a girl's,
Mhm.
and his hair and everything about him is just
Yeah,
beautiful. And
angelic.
he's
Yeah.
exactly like he's
Mhm.
very like he's coming from an icon, like a religious iconography or something. And then you have Dracula, who's very engulfing, even if it was domineering to him, like the scene when he's just shaving and he cuts himself, and you
Mhm.
see Dracula from behind holding him. If it was another guy, you wouldn't have felt that danger, that imminent danger. You wouldn't have felt very scared for Jonathan. With Keanu being, like he's just this soft self, this beautiful, fragile, in a way, a fragile masculinity that he and someone like River Phoenix, whom I really loved, kind of represented back then in the 90s.
Mhm.
So I just loved him as Jonathan. Even like you said, he doesn't have that range of an actor, but I don't think Jonathan really required that acting skills. Probably I think the acting was reserved for roles like Mina and Van Helsing and Dracula himself. But then you have all the side characters, and then you have Jonathan is kind of like the damsel here. Like even he's
Mhm.
being saved, like Mina wants to save him. He tries to save himself by running from the brides. He's taken captive by the brides for a long time, and then Van Helsing and Mina and stuff kind of like protect him from Dracula, because he's still, I think, he hasn't restored his strength yet. So why can't we have Keanu? He would be like the perfect looking face. And I think they also brought him because all the girls would go wild over him when he's casting Dracula. And what a great and smart choice too. So great casting here.
Ugh, perfectly said. What other side characters should we touch on, or moments? I thought the werewolf was another moment where I was really fascinated by, again, where the CGI sort of, what role the CGI played versus the makeup, and I thought that those two things were so seamlessly done.
I really like the wolf. I like the wolf because I felt like the fact that they made Dracula kind of like transforming into multiple character. I think this was also in the novel, but here you could even tell like there is the regular wolf, which kind of like follows Dracula, the children of the night, what music they make, and then you have Dracula himself transforming into this hybrid thing between bat and man and beast. So you have the wolf, which yes might look like I love werewolves. I'm just obsessed with them, as you can tell. I'm obsessed with anything creepy. So for me, I always grade werewolves. This might not be like my best ever werewolf, but it kind of fits this world because it has the same features as the Dracula character. Like, when he's transforming, he's gonna have this face, this wrinkled, kind of like monstrous face that is very distinctive in a way. It's like this print like of Dracula. So when you have this werewolf creature kind of like going to consume them, especially with Lucy, I think he was there with her a lot, because I think Lucy kind of like ignited something in Dracula that he didn't even know, although he wasn't interested in turning her like he did with Mina. He just wanted to consume her, kind of like wanted to end her in a way and make her just a dark character. But at the same time, when you see Dracula transforming into this wolf creature, you just realize it's like the manifestation of the man beast. Like the man and the beast, which used to be separate, are now this. So it makes it the more effective, the more scary, the more, I don't know, exciting to watch. So I kind of like, I love it even more than the bat. I think it's like one
Mm.
of my favorite manifestations. The bat was just like, no, I totally understood it. Now when I watched it too, I was like, God, it's just so, I can't stand it. Why is it there? And even I think kind of like Gary Oldman kind of struggled with the costume itself,
Mm.
struggled with the makeup. I think it just constricted him, and this affected his performance in a way. I think this was his lowest of the whole movie. So yeah,
Mm.
when he was just the wolf, you could tell he had this liberty, this movement, this very predatory movement. So yeah, it added to the fun and added to the scare too.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. I think the physicality of all these performances is really interesting. Even with the women when they're sort of like I don't know, they feel this new energy coursing through their veins. It's like such an interesting movement that we don't that's constricted earlier on in the movie, and there's as you they sort of reach that level of freedom is fascinating. That just popped into my head as you were but something else I was thinking about when I was watching it is if we were to make this movie now, it would be completely overtaken by CGI to the point where it would be distracting, and B, it would probably be 3 hours long. I mean, I was delighted in the fact that this movie was like a perfectly crisp 2 hours. There wasn't very much like fat. I felt like everything served a purpose and moved the story along.
Not a dull moment.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now I don't. And okay, so if because you started it, who would be your dream cast for this revival, or like this?
Well, it's so funny because I kept thinking about Nicolas Cage, and didn't he do a Renfield movie or something
Yes.
recently? Yeah, but I was just thinking like he would be a really good Dracula.
Yeah, imagine him.
Mhm,
Ooh, and I loved Nick Cage back in the day when he was like all
mhm,
insane. Vampire Kiss was like one of my favorite movies ever, and even him going all insane in just Face Off, and I love Face Off too. So
mhm,
I love Nick Cage. I'd love to see what he would make with this because now he's also coming in Long Legs. I think I haven't seen him even in the
mhm.
teasers, and I'm just so excited for him. So Nick Cage is Dracula. So who's your Mina? You're
I'm
gonna love
trying.
Mina.
That's what I was thinking about when I was like, well, he was the one that popped out to me from the beginning about Drag, but Mina, you need somebody that has like the innocence and like the femme fatale. I mean, maybe like Zendaya
I was going to
or
say Zendaya.
yeah.
And she's also very like her face is delicate. Her features are kind of so she
Mhm.
kind of like fits the Mina category. Lucy, I think. So who's gonna be Lucy and who's gonna be Jonathan Harker?
I think Austin Butler should be somewhere in this movie because
He has to be.
he he knows how to maybe Renfield just so that he can let his inner freak out once again. That man should
Wow,
just play freaks his entire career in one form or another.
you're just like me. I love
Lucy,
him when he's playing a freak.
yeah.
Yeah.
What about somebody like I don't know Sydney Sweeney or like
Whoa,
a,
and we'd extend her like I would call for extending the Lucy scenes, and with red hair too, she would look just amazing.
mhm.
Now we have us a cast, huh? And it
Yeah.
would be like the innocent Jonathan Harker. Who would they cast then? We have like what? Well, one of the new guys. I think there are a lot of new guys. I'd get like
Mhm.
someone like I don't know, Jonathan Bailey. What is his name?
Yeah,
Oh,
Jonathan.
but
Ooh, I was thinking like a one of the Chris's, like Chris Pine or something, because he just looks
yes,
like a Disney prince, and he would
he
be.
is.
Seems like the kind of man that would get himself into trouble. But yeah, Jonathan Bailey. I just finished Bridgerton, so yeah, put Jonathan Bailey everywhere too.
Yes, yes, yes. We have us a
Mhm.
movie. We have us a new
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah,
That's
well,
so cool.
maybe we could have Francis Ford Coppola come back.
Please. He
Yes.
wants to direct more.
How are you feeling about Megapolis and all of the conversation out of Cannes?
Okay, out of Ken, there are movies that I really want to watch. Like there are
Mm,
movies that I'm so excited for. I think I'm excited for Anora, for The Substance, for all the light that has been, all the light that we have. The Indian
mm,
movie, I think, is gonna be great. Also, the Iranian film, The Fig, The Seed of the Fig. I
yeah.
remember names. I think I'm gonna watch these ones so much. Megalopolis, I don't know. Look, I'm not really into the like. I didn't like Babylon. I don't like La La
Mm,
Land. I know some of my friends really love them as cinephiles. I don't know. I can't judge before I watch, but it's not something that I'm excited for. For me, I want to watch Bird, of course, Andrea Arnold, because I love Andrea Arnold so much.
mhm,
So I'm more of the, just the indie stuff. kind of girl. Kinds of Kindness, because there's Jesse Plemons and he got, like the best acting. So this
Mhm.
means chasing the gold. I should chase the gold with him and see what he has
Yes.
done in this movie.
Yeah.
So of course I have to see all the films where hair and makeup play a thing. Maybe The Substance, because
Yeah.
then they would see stuff. But Megalopolis, it would be like important, I think, for hair and makeup too. But I don't know.
Mhm. I'm really looking forward to Kinds of Kindness, because I think, speaking of sort of this idea of freaks or outsiders, I think oh my god, I'm blanking on the Lanthimos. Yorgos Lanthimos is one of those
Yes.
modern directors that is sort of doing something similar as Dracula, which is like embracing, maybe not necessarily a monster in the traditional sense, but outcasts, right? Or people who are off the beaten path. And I'm really interested to see where this movie is going to go.
He claws at the insides of humanity. And when you see him, because I'm obsessed with him, I've seen him since Dogtooth, he kind of
Mhm.
like takes something sinister in the human spirit and just claws at it. So you
Mhm.
see the lobster, and it's all about relationships, and it's all about sex, and it's all about how people dynamics between men and women, and he kind of like brings out the worst in it. Dogtooth, the worst in families, the worst in raising a
Mhm.
family, and the killing of sacred deer as well. And then you have the favorite, and it's the worst of sexual obsession and power, and like possessing another human being, and just kind of like this cutthroat competition. And then you have something like Poor Things, and it's about this baby to adult thing, the kind of like going in reverse, kind of like I felt like it was a reverse Benjamin Button kind of way, like a darker
Mhm.
tale on this Frankenstein, but through a woman. So he kind of like looks for something freaky inside you, and instead of you just ignoring it because modernity and civilization, I don't want to scratch at it, he just scratches at it, and it's
Mhm.
full blown in your face. So he kind of scares me sometimes, because when I watched The Lobster, I watched it with an ex, and we got out of the screening hating each other's guts, because it was just so bad. Like, why? Oh my god, he made being in a relationship sound so just scary, and at the same time he made being single also like a death cause. So it's a scary film in a way that
Mm.
it just brings out the darker aspects of being a human being, I think, but very amplified. So I want to see Kind of Kindness, because they say it's going back to his roots, to his old school.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm in. So it totally, so he kind of fits, like he's a modern director of freaks too. Like you see this
Mhm.
more back in the day, especially in European movies. We don't have those level of directors anymore, but with him on this freaky, darker side, and then you have Luca Guadagnino on the sexual, sultry, homoerotic
Yeah.
side. We have more European methods, or kind of like schools of directing, which brings us to, I think, the sinister and the sexier parts of nature.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that a lot when I was watching Dracula. Like, we just don't see movies like this anymore. And I know people say that, but I like how much it leans into the sensuality. We don't see that anymore. I like that it leans into the campy ridiculousness of it all too.
It's
It's
very camp.
it yeah, and see, the thing is it knows exactly what kind of movie it is, and it's completely okay with that, and that makes it more fun and easier to embrace. You know what I mean?
Definitely, because they're like all these awesome scenes where characters are going crazy, and then you have
Mhm.
there's this amazing scene where just Lucy and Mina are running under the rain, and there is this huge head of Dracula. Like, I love this so much. Why can't we have more of that in modern movies? I need to watch it more often, please. So
Mhm.
I love that it's camp and it's like unapologetic, like sticking its tongue out.
So, I mean, are there other movies? I definitely, now that we talked about Poor Things, I can see sort of elements of that transformation sort of in what we talked about with Mina, the subtlety of it, right? I mean, are there other movies that maybe remind you of Dracula, or like movies that you think, okay, if you like Dracula, you should watch this, or movies that give you a similar feeling, if they're not even similar thematically?
Wow, I love this question. I think Cocteau. I watched a lot
Mm-hmm.
of Jean Cocteau, and I think Beauty and the Beast, and some of his earlier films are just amazing. It's just, I think Edward Scissorhands also has many elements of that. Some of the Tim Burton movies. Hmm. I love Catwoman in Batman Returns because I feel like
Mm,
she has this tormented villainous vibe to her. Like she's very Dracula in her own right. Death becomes her kind of like brings to mind some of, I think, oh my gosh, I like some of the French extremity films too. I
mm,
wish I, for some reason, I know it has nothing to do with this, but High Tension, it's a bloody
mhm,
movie. It's crazy. It's got a very
mm,
great lesbian love story at the middle, and also Love Lies Bleeding. You know, like these movies might not be similar in terms of Dracula, but they give me this vibe. Like they give me this
mhm.
vibe of just consumption and going after the carnal desires. In
Yeah,
terms of gothicness, there's Crimson. I think it's Crimson Peak.
yeah,
Ooh,
yeah. The Del
oh,
Toro, yeah.
that one was just, and the one that it kind of makes me so sad for some reason, Pan's Labyrinth. I just hear the
Hmm.
theme and I cry.
I
It's just
thought a
so,
lot about Pan's Labyrinth when watching Dracula. I don't even know what element of Dracula reminded me of Pan's Labyrinth, or vice versa, I should say. But I did think about Pan's Labyrinth a lot.
it makes it just a beautiful movie that makes you so sad,
Hmm.
and it's also about death, and it's unapologetic even in the deaths. Like it shows you that, yeah, just this cruelty happens, this death happens. It wanted to be the what of water, the one with Michael Shannon. What is it called? The Age of
The
Water.
Shape of Water.
Yes, I think it wanted to be that, but something fell short. Like I don't hate The Shape of Water, but it didn't reach that level, like of beauty.
Mm,
It had like the creature from the Black Lagoon or the Blue Lagoon kind of vibe to it, but something fell short. Like you cannot put it next to Dracula. But it also has similar themes. I love it when there's like the beast loving the person, the normal person. Any,
mm.
of course, good werewolf movie, at least where it's a normal kind of like a very complex werewolf human story, not one where the werewolf is going like "Rah," just
Do you
killing and eating
have
everyone.
do you have a good werewolf recommendation? I've realized in speaking to you that I probably have not seen as many good werewolf movies as I should have.
Okay, there's this one. Unfortunately, it's not that good, but it's not that good. But I don't hate it. It's called Blood and Chocolate. It's very tamed down. It's very toned down. And
Oh.
you have, of course, the Jack Nicholson one. I think it's a beautiful werewolf movie. Wolf is just. There is a very good French werewolf movie too that I gotta watch because it's not about love story. It's about sisterhood, and I love movies about sisters because like my sister is like one of my best friends in the world. So it's good because it puts the werewolf story in the middle of the family and how this affects her. So I will send you this French movie definitely, and then you have
Yes.
Wolf starring Jack Nicholson and James Spader and Michelle Pfeiffer. Girl, you're gonna love this movie. I tell you, it's very dark, and for me, it's a modern gothic.
Well, I'm gonna need more movie recommendations from you in general, because if they're anything like Dracula and the amount of fun I had with this one, I'm ready for wherever other journey you want to take me on. Let's go.
I have to send you movies, and then I have to send you
Yes.
movies that you will come after me. Like, Jaylan, why did you let me know? Because I love doing this to people.
No, I love that. As we wrap up our Dracula, are there any other elements of that movie in particular that we want to touch on that we haven't talked about?
The music, the soundtrack.
Mm,
Isn't it this?
yes.
I cry when I listen to it. I think it's so beautiful and sad. And everything about this movie is just, it's very magical to me. Like it makes me weak in the knees. I even love the ending. I love the idea of the dawn, just ending very quickly, and then dawn sinks into sunset, and you feel the fear, the line of blue fire. Even
Mm,
the weak, like just effects that were made are stunning in a way. The idea of the castle itself, and the idea of the castle being a prison of the soul, and not just the color palette, how it was very reds, like very Japanese movie red, and then you have like the embers and the golden ones, and then you have the dark blue, black London, and how it's very different between Romania, where it's the land of, yes, murder and just killing, but at the same time it's the land of sensuality, and then you have London, where kind of like it buries all the beautiful dreams. At least this is what I felt.
hmm.
So
And
of
it's
course
sort
the
of
cinema.
sitting under a fog, right? Like it's like,
Yes.
yeah.
Definitely. So this cinematography, of course, I think a lot of the elements of the movie just deserve episodes on their own right. So a lot of
Hmm.
that.
You know, if I had watched this movie when I was younger, I probably would have made it my entire personality. Like, I would have been Winona for like 5 Halloweens. Maybe I'm gonna be Winona for Halloween this year. I honestly.
Girl, I have to. I made her my personality. I think when I watched Heather's, it was a very dark comedy, and I think I embraced her, but also embraced like the Christian Slater character in that movie. Like Heather's for me was Christian Slater.
Oh, I need to watch Heather's. I haven't seen.
You have to. Case is what killed the
I
dinosaurs, darling.
might do that after this. I'm not even exaggerating. That may be my activity for the rest of the evening. Speaking of which, so we usually end our episodes by talking about sort of other pop culture things that we've been obsessed with, whatever they may be. So take me into your mind a little bit, because I'm very fascinated by what other things pique your interest.
I really like movies that just touch on vulnerability. I think a lot. I love vulnerability in movies, especially if it's male vulnerability. I love queer cinema so much, which is why I love directors like Xavier Dolan or Céline Sciamma. I love Wesley Snipes so much. He's like my favorite 90s ever action star. I love him so much. I'm just obsessed with him. I don't know why. I want to talk about it all the time. And I also like Supernatural, the TV series. I was obsessed with it, but only the first 5 seasons because I thought Dean Winchester is just one of the greatest. Like, I quote Dean Winchester in my daily life. Like, even when I'm like flirting to a guy or something, I'd throw in a Dean Winchesterism, you know, like just for kicks. So I'm just obsessed with a lot of topics, but mainly this. Like, you would always find me talking about Wesley Snipes, always find me talking about Supernatural and Dean Winchester, always find me talking about movies which feel very vulnerable and very just indie, just giving off this vibe of humans interacting. Like Gus Van Sant's cinema was something I love. Now I love. Recently, I watched Beach Rats and thought it was amazing. Scrapper, both of them starring Harris Dickinson, and then you have After Sun. So it was just
After Sun,
beautiful. It's just very subtle and very, very sad. Also, Martin McDonough, because he writes like the funniest films ever, but then you see the Banshees of Inisherin and it just made me cry so hard. But also in Bruges, I just loved just laughing at it and just being so chill. So I think male vulnerability is something that I'm obsessed with. Wesley Snipes in his own right, like Guy Pearce too, because I just love him. I can't help. And then you have of course, I watch Austin Butler, but like I told you, I like Austin Butler to be in his best self, playing a freak. So yeah, there are a lot of topics that I'm obsessed with. Definitely, just anything that contains blood and grime, and at the same time, sexuality and vulnerability.
I love how varying your interests are. Like, I've never really heard the combination of Wesley Snipes, male vulnerability, Supernatural. I mean, we've covered a lot in an hour, and I'm very impressed. And this conversation took turns that I was not expecting.
I love talking to you, to be honest, Shadan. You're amazing.
Well, we'll have to plan. Now I have like episodes for 10 other things that I need to talk to you about. Speaking of, are you like a big reader?
Yes.
Okay, there's this, and I mentioned that because there's this book that my current obsession. It's called Martyr, and it's written by this Iranian American, as am I, and so I'm always interested in reading Iranian American literature.
Wow.
But it's called Martyr, and it's about this guy who he lost his mother when he was a baby, and so he's always been fascinated by this idea of like death and martyrdom, and so he sets out to write a book about it. So it's like chapters about famous martyrs in with his life and sort of his quest to become an artist, and it is like deeply vulnerable, and I'm always fascinated by like the children of immigrants sort of rebelling against what they think that we should be, and sort of anyway. So as you were talking, I just kept going back to my book, and I'm excited. I have like 1 chapter left, but so that's kind of what I've been reading, and I've been watching Bridgerton because I love a good period piece. I would say I don't know if my taste contain as many multitudes as yours. As I said, I'm very impressed, but I do find myself like all over the place too, because I'll be, I watch like fluff like Bridgerton, and then I'll watch, I don't know, something very serious, and maybe I need to watch, because I actually have not seen Dogtooth. I need to finish the rest of my Lanthimos. I think that's a good project.
You have to.
Yeah. Before
Right.
Kinds of Kindness, I want to revisit all of the Lanthimos that I've seen, but also make sure that I complete my blind spots, as they say.
You have to watch it and you're gonna love it. I'm sure of this.
Mhm.
And you have to send me like the details of this book because I love reading and this sounds like an amazing book, by the way. And I'm kind of like, I'm Egyptian, by the way. So yeah, I kind of like, I understand the idea of, like what the family and the kind of like the constitution itself kind of like places on you, and how sometimes you rebel. So this sounds like a great book. And I feel
Yeah.
like there are things that you on a personal level, because of your back, like I'm speaking about myself, of your background, of your presence in life, of sometimes being a harbor between, because I read that Francis Ford Coppola wanted Dracula to be a harbor between the East and the West. So I think us being the harbor between that two, it kind of gives you a unique perspective. So I'm just glad that you're sharing it with me, Shadan.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated by, like you say, sort of like the blend of cultures, and sort of like how every time I think I've reached like I think I'm more American, or I think I'm more this, then something happens where that becomes challenge, or I don't really, I don't know. I guess self-reflection too is something that I'm really interested about, and like how your self-reflection sort of marries with like societal expectations, and how those two things inform each other. So like anytime that I can find that within anything that I'm watching or reading or whatever, I find that to be so fascinating.
Makes you less alone. It makes you more connected. The more I talk to people from different parts of the world, from different places, different backgrounds, even different stages of existence, and even different classes in the same part of the world, I feel less alone, because I think all of my life I felt like a recluse, as secular, like a solitary person. But when I connect with people and different people, I don't limit myself to one culture and one existence, I feel complete and I feel less alone. So I totally get what you mean. The idea that you have to belong to something or be more something more than the other. I just have to be myself. And that's the way it is.
I can't think of a better note to end our conversation, but before I let you go, tell our listeners where they can find you on social media, where they can find your work.
Of course, I write in session film, so you'll find a lot of me there. I'm also on Twitter as Jaylan_Salah. I'm on Instagram, Jaylan Salman. And you could find my series and my interviews on YouTube, and also on Geek Vibes Nation YouTube channel, where I just try to interview as many directors, like screenwriters, artists, as much as I can, just to connect, as I told you, with the world, trying to understand it one person at a time.
I love that. And as always, I would appreciate all of our listeners to rate and review, spread the word about Chasing the Gold, the In Session podcast in particular, Women in Session. I mean, we have so many podcasts within our family, and we would so appreciate any love that you can give us. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much for geeking out with us about Dracula.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.